everyone. Hello and welcome to the Book Club podcast and video. I don't even know what we're calling it anymore. We're doing both those things. Maybe you're watching them in one of those ways. Thanks for coming yet again. Today we are talking about the first Gaunt's Ghost book.
First and only.
First and only. It's not a choice of the patrons. It's not a choice of me or you. Who chose this book?
Dan Abnett.
Dan Abnett told you to read it.
He told me to read it.
So we're doing first and only this week. So if you don't know, if you're new to the channel, then hi, I'm Ian. This is Mira.
Hi.
And we talk about Warhammer books. We read them and then we talk about Warhammer books. We're doing first and only. We've done lots more. We sometimes allow our patrons to pick the next book. There will be a poll going up just after we finish recording this for the next book. The last one was Brutal Cunning, which our patrons picked.
Heard a rumour might be a poll full of female authors this time around.
I'm really trying to engineer that.
Yeah.
but yeah, I sort of need a few more. Otherwise, it's a poll of 2. But yeah, so if you want to get involved, then our links are all in the thing below. Our plugs are all in the thing below. And you can vote on potentially the next one. But this time we are doing first and only. So Mira. Gaunt's Ghosts. Are we doing all of these now? Because you've managed, after us starting the Heresy, despite definitely saying we weren't going to do the Heresy, we've now started the other longest series in Warhammer.
Well, to give you your props, you were trying to warn me and protect me because I don't do well with gross and these are very lengthy. So you tried to warn me off and I honestly don't know how this has happened.
Yeah.
I don't know how this has happened, but, I spoke to Dan Abnett. I can't remember what we were talking about.
Yeah.
When I spoke to Dan about Horus Rising, he kind of was keen that I talk to him about Gaunt's Ghost. And I thought if, everybody's favourite Warhammer Santa Dan Abnett asks you to do a thing, you do the thing.
That means that you have read the first 3 books.
First and only.
Ghostmaker.
Yep. And Necropolis.
Yeah, Necropolis, which many people would say is the first actual book. But so you've read the first 3 of those. We're at least going to do those 3. And I guess we'll go on from there.
Ian, you're going to do all of them with me.
If I have to do 18?
16.
16, okay.
If I have to do them, you have to do them.
Okay, fine. So we're going to do first and only. So yeah, also that means we should plug this now. If you want to see Mira's chat to Dan Abnett, because you chatted to Dan Abnett again about all 3 books at once, right?
Yes. Yeah. Come on my channel.
That's on your channel?
Yeah.
On your YouTube channel and on your Patreon?
Yeah. My YouTube channel, I try and interview authors and creators of things that make me excited. It mostly is falling on Black Library authors. But yeah, come on over and say hi.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So yeah, there we are. So if you want to have a look, all the links are in the thing below. And yeah, first and only, the first Gaunt's Ghost book. So it's an interesting one, this, and I don't know how much you knew about, or what Dan said about the position this holds in 40k. Because as far as Black Library novels go, these are actually some of the earliest. This is the earliest book we've read.
I feel I might have summed up my first impression in my intro to this book. So I don't want to spoil that too much.
Okay, well, in that case, Mira, please, the action movie plot summary of definitely a war movie, but also sort of a spy movie, first and only.
Okay. In a world where planets are destroyed on a daily basis, some men escaped. In the 41st millennium, the Tanith 1st Light Infantry was sent to a spaceship for a crime they didn't commit, but in duty to the Emperor. These men promptly escaped from an exterminates event to the security stockade of the Gaunt's Ghost Regiment. Today, betrayed by their comrades in war, still wanted by the baddies and richies of the Imperium, they survive as soldiers of fortune. Skullduggery is uncovered. Soldier betrays soldier, but Gaunt inspired brotherhood and lives to save the Imperium from chaos, treachery, and men of iron.
Yes.
If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire Gaunt's Ghosts.
Okay, that's like one popular war property I didn't think we'd go to, but yeah, that's basically it, right? Gaunt's Ghosts. It's I forgot when I was going back through this It's got like Men of Iron in it.
I was
It's
so
so
excited. That's a legend, and they're not allowed to talk about it.
No, and it's in the first Gaunt Ghost book.
It's in here. If you are like what you're talking about, this is the. You know, we all understand the reason the Imperium exists, and they've got cronkety old spaceships they can't fix. Is because they're cronkety old beat up spaceships because they're scared of like AI.
Yeah, and the reason they're scared of AI is not ChatGPT.
No,
it is in fact ChatGPT, but in robots.
Yeah. And very much the kind of whole Terminator premise.
Yeah.
And I know we're rushing ahead, but for me, it felt like such a big fat reward at the end because this is really in the trenches warfare.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I was really surprised. It's a complete change in pace. There's way less kind of crazy magic and demons and, you know, and Xenos. And it's very much, you know, horrible humans.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's a real. They're the most war novels, especially at the time they came out, because so many other things are like sort of superhero-y, space marine action things.
Magic-y.
This is gritty and horrible, and I forgot its start. Not many of them happen in trench warfare because the ghosts are meant to be this like specialist detachment because they're like the specialist scouting people. But yeah, this starts in trenches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that their special thing is roguey. You know, they have their stealth cloaks even. Like I always imagine all these cloaks with like moss and twigs and, you know.
Yeah.
And they come from a forest planet.
Where the trees move.
A bit like,
walking trees.
NT, Ewok-y.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I can get behind this planet.
And they're all sort of vaguely Irish, Welsh, Scottish, maybe?
Celtish,
Yeah, Celtish.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I spoke to Dan, he was like, no, they're not anyone. They're not anyone. They're all of them.
They're everybody.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
Pasty white tattoos, black hair. Yeah.
Well. So yeah, let's go through it. So, this book is. I've split it into two. There's basically two stories happening, and then they intersect at the end, and you realise they're intersecting, right?
Yeah.
It's told as like a sort of action story, war story, which involves conflict with other regiments, which I think is also one of the most interesting things about these books, is because you have all these different cultures and they all fucking hate each other. And then the second sort of thing that happens is this like the story of how Gaunt got to where he is.
Yeah.
And his backstory. There isn't really that much on the ghosts. Like we meet them and they hate him.
Yeah.
But there isn't like a ton of detail. That's kind of what the next book does.
Yeah.
This is kind of split between plot, the A plot, and the B plot is like this flashback, and we find out why Gaunt thinks that way.
Yeah.
And we sort of meet our main character. So yeah, we start off on a planet called Fortis Binary.
Yeah, you're so good at remembering all this stuff.
It's written in front of me on my notes. Right. On Fortis Binary, right? And that will come up. That comes up a few times during the series. You've got Gaunt. He's the Commissar Colonel of the Tanith First and Only. And you get a little bit of a thing of how this happened. Like Gaunt, you know, he's
special.
He's special. He was the favourite of the previous War Master. Different War Master.
Don't like War Masters.
Lots of War Masters. So War Master Slado, he was the favourite of War Master Slado, so he was given, he was a commissar who was given Colonel rank.
I'm dying, you get to be this.
Yeah, and that's weird. Like no one else has that in 40k. That's like, so he's a Commissar Colonel, and he's leading these people called the Tanith First and Only. He was sent to Tanith to make these 3 regiments, the first 3 regiments from Tanith.
He was literally like the recruitment officer.
Yeah, he was going to like...
Come on, boys, come on my ship, come and do fighting.
And then at that moment, the whole planet got attacked by chaos, and he made the decision to go, no, you're all going to die if you stay here, so instead of letting you go and die to protect your loved ones and planet, I'm just going to get you off world and use you as a regiment and join the Imperial Guard.
He saved them. It was...
Yeah.
Okay.
He did save them, but they hate him for it because they would have preferred to have fought for their planet.
But they would have just been blown up.
They would have just been blown up, yeah. So there's that. And we sort of... and then we find them, they've been in this crusade, the Sabbat World's Crusade, for a number of years, and they're fighting, we get the impression there's lots and lots of different people to fight in the Sabbat World's Crusade. It's against sort of chaos worshipping humans.
Yeah.
And currently they're fighting a cult called the Shriven, who are like generic religious zealots.
Yeah.
I guess is how you describe them.
They're
an army.
Your bog standard cultists.
Standard cultists. Yeah. So they're fighting the Shriven, and they're in. It's sort of trench warfare.
Yeah.
And it's not fun.
Oh God, no. There's very few laughs in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does get more. Yeah, as you go through the Gaunt's books, one of the things is that you start to, and you'll get it a bit in Necropolis. They start to bring in like side characters and followers and like relatives and kids and things.
I just want to give you a quick tone of this book. I admire him. I'll follow him anywhere. That's all there is to say. I left my homeworld the night it died, and I've been fighting for its memory ever since. We Tanith are a dying breed. There's only about 200 of us left. Gaunt only got away with enough for one regiment, the Tanith first, the first and only. That's what makes us ghosts, you see. The last few unquiet souls of a dead world. And I suppose we'll all keep going until we're all done.
That's what makes it exposition, you see.
And that is the tone.
That's the tone.
It's not a Kane novel.
No, it's
any
not.
Chance.
Well, the interesting thing is Kane is very much meant to be taking the piss a bit out of this.
Yes.
Like that's what and it's interesting when you meet commissars that
so Kane is the Blackadder of
this.
Yeah,
if this is the Band of Brothers, Kane is the Blackadder. Yeah. And so there's a lot of like deliberate like references. And what's interesting is that all the novels that do that when the main characters are commissars make really good main characters, right? Because they're commissars are outsiders. They're always outsiders to the regiment they're in.
Yeah.
So they're quite a good outside eye, and they're in a position of authority, but not usually top authority. So that's quite good. The thing is, commissars in the game are absolutely horrible. So you have to write commissars who are like a bit more moral than a normal commissar and aren't just shooting everyone all the time.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So Kane has this whole like, well, I could shoot everyone all the time, but then they'd shoot me in the back when I was leading them. That's only stupid commissars do that. And Gaunt's sort of the same. He rarely executes someone.
Yeah.
Like he's very much like, well, if a good morale officer will make them like you.
Yeah.
So usually commissars are
murdery.
In the game they're just murdery. Oh. But in this to write them as a character you have to make them less murdery.
What game are you playing if you're playing with Gaunt's Ghost?
You're playing Warhammer 40k.
And they're just humans.
Just humans.
But how can they play Space Marines against? They'd just be.
Well, there's loads of them and they're sneaky.
Oh, okay.
And you've got people like McCall who's like the ultimate like assassin bloke. Anyway, they've got plot armor. But thankfully, one of the nice things about these books is that you see how rare Space Marines are.
Yeah, you don't
we
see
meet
them
like
often.
a couple. Yeah. We're fighting the Chivalry. We meet the ghosts, the original ghosts, so like Corbeck, Rawn, Bragg, Larkin, Bryn Milo.
Yeah.
Definitely not magic. Bryn Milo.
He's magic.
They basically have this big fight. They counterattack into enemy territory, but they're split up. Or the ghosts move forward out of their trenches into enemy territory. They're split up, and they have a spooky evening, and they meet some other units. They meet the Vitrian Dragoons,
who become friends.
They're pals. They wear glass armor.
Yeah, so cool.
So they're like heavy infantry in glass armor, all right? And then various things happen, and then essentially Gaunt reunites his regiment, pushes forward, discovers like a maglev line that goes into the enemy lines.
I liked that.
And finds like a spooky ammo dump. Yeah.
It felt very like Indiana Jones. They were going along the mag line. And
also like, it's the thing of like, yes, we are playing a war novel, but there's only so much trench warfare we can do. Can they now have a weird little mission that only like a few of them can go on?
Go in a cave.
Yeah, go in this cave.
Is that where they find corrupt Space Marines?
Yeah, so they find some Iron Warriors there.
Iron Warriors, first time I've met them.
Yeah, they're how would you describe Iron Warriors?
What colour?
They're silver.
Okay.
With hazard chevrons.
And
yellow and black hazard stripes.
No, hazard stripes.
And they are the artillery logistics being grumpy sort of Chaos Space Marine.
Who's their Primarch?
Perturabo.
Yeah, okay.
Perturabo.
I feel like people make a lot of jokes about him.
Yeah, he's grumpy.
Okay.
He's like a grumpy Primarch. He also likes playing with toy soldiers and building tiny models. Yeah.
Okay, that's why everyone loves him.
Yeah, so he's like, he's grumpy Primarch. He's one of the grumpy ones. And he's very annoying. In the Heresy, we'll meet him in the Heresy eventually.
We will reduce all the Primarchs.
He's kind of annoying.
We will reduce all the Primarchs to the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah. So he's definitely grumpy. Okay. Him or Ferrus Manus. Anyway, so we meet the Iron Warriors. They blow up the space. Basically, there's a lot happening. Rushing through it. They find a weird stone monolith, which reminds him of a spooky prediction from the other plot we'll get to in a bit.
That's the prologue. So I loved that I was really pleased that there was a bit of mysticism coming in.
Yeah.
to break up the killing.
To break up all the
It's good,
killing and
yeah.
sadness, there's some magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of destroying the monolith, they realign it, which confuses all the chaos people, and then they blow up the whole thing. And what happens is important here. What happens is, because we get the introduction, we've sort of seen them at this point, but we get the main introduction of the Jantine patricians. So what this means is that they blow up the ammo dump, which kind of wins the war.
And then the Jantines have
Are
been
all
hanging
ready
back.
Yeah, they're hanging
They
back,
were
ready
hanging
to
back.
be their big assault, and they then have nothing to assault.
But also, just to say, they were expecting Gaunts to be completely obliterated,
Yes,
and then
which
they
they-
would clear up.
And they're very much so. The Jantine patricians are your standard posh
Arseholes.
officer arseholes, right? And this is so one of the other things this is
The
meant.
Erebus.
They're the Emperor's children of the
Emperor's children.
The Emperor's
of Gaunt's
children
Ghosts.
of Gaunt's Ghosts is the Jantine patricians, whose main character trait is cunt, right?
We can't do that. You have to
can
believe
totally
it.
say that.
Okay.
That's their main character trait, though. Like everyone, to a man, complete arsehole.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look at these rugged Tanith with their tattoos. Oh, you wouldn't see them in a ballroom or whatever the fuck.
But they're really vile. They're kidnappy.
Yeah.
They'll stab you in the backy.
Yeah.
They'll wait for you to be destroyed and then come and roll their tanks over your corpses.
Yeah. They're horrible people.
They're really horrible.
And yeah, so we meet the Jantine patricians who will, and that story will go all the way to the top. But we meet them. They're dicks. Right, brilliant. So then we catch up with them. So then they win the war in Fortis Binary. We go to a place called Pyretes, where they do some spy stuff. What happens is they're all in a break between deployments.
Yeah.
In Pyretes,
and they've got downtime on a spaceship.
yeah,
which is never good.
Yeah, they've got downtime on a
planet.
where they get to the spaceship next.
I
yeah.
thought that was so clever the way they wrote about shore leave and basically them getting into trouble. But
because they basically the troops get bored and do some crime.
yeah, 100%.
For a laugh,
That's
basically.
a plot.
Yeah.
And during this time, Gaunt is slipped a mysterious. He's kind of encouraged to go and meet an old friend, and gets this mysterious crystal which has a dark secret. It kind of is a bit like a cereal box. You need to decode the crystal.
Yeah. It's all a bit convenient, but yeah. And basically, there's a conspiracy high up in the Crusade, and they reckon it's this guy called Lord High Militant Dravir, who is like a sponsor of the Jantine.
Yeah.
He's another posh person.
He's horrible.
Yeah, and he wants to take control of the
Imperium.
of the Crusade. He wants to be in charge of it instead of the new guy who's called Makaroth. So Makaroth was like, apparently the way this all works is Slado was in charge, Slado died, Makaroth took over, and no one really expected it. Makaroth doesn't know Gaunt, which is why Gaunt is Colonel Commissar, but also kind of weirdly sidelined to this odd unit.
Yeah, anyone who's ambitious in 40k is pretty much horrible.
Yes,
as well.
this is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, what happens is the Jantine patricians, who are then pissed off at the ghosts, try and attack Gaunt and Milo while they're coming back from this thing.
Yeah.
And then, in order to escape, Milo links up with the ghosts who are midway through doing the crime.
Yeah.
And then there's this big fight between like the ghosts holed up in away warehouses and the Jantine patricians attacking.
So Milo is magic.
Milo's magic?
He's a psyker.
He's magic.
I know. I should know the terms.
He's not. He's what?
Must be.
Yeah, he's spooky. Milo's a bit spooky.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so that happens. They fight off the Jantine, fine. Then they're all on a ship. Then they all go on ships. They're being sent to the next deployment, right? So they're on a ship, and it turns out they're all billeted together, all three, the Vitrians, the Jantine, and the Ghosts, because apparently...
Why would you do that?
Well, High Command don't care. They're like, this is your problem, sort your own fucking troops out.
Some servitor going, oh, we'll put them next to them.
The first Kane novel opens with the same regiment trying to kill each other.
Oh, that's true.
in a fight on a ship. Yeah. So this is normal. And essentially they do some more fighting. Gaunt gets there's an assassination attempt on Gaunt. And Gaunt also briefs the whole regiment and lets them know that he thinks there's this conspiracy to take over the Crusade.
Which is quite good in the story because Gaunt trusts his regiment who hate him.
Yes,
which
this is true.
actually is a weird kind of like exchange then.
And there's a bit by this where like the first few, like Milo likes him and Corbeck starts to sort of
like
warm to him.
Yeah.
Corbeck's like the lead. Corbeck is randomly given control of the Tanith, right? He's like the ranking officer, and Gaunt's like, you're the colonel now.
Yeah.
And then there's Rawn, who's the major, who who hates everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, right, that all happens. They're on the ship. The other thing that happens on the ship is we get to see the bad guys.
Yeah.
So we meet Dravir, And we see he's with his buddy, who is
Haldane.
Haldane, that I've written is Haldane from the Eisenhorn novels, but this is before the Eisenhorn novels.
Yeah.
So actually, Haldane, if you remember, Haldane was in the Eisenhorn novels, he's the interrogator to the cranky old Inquisitor.
Yes.
And he gets
yeah.
hurt and reconstructs his face when he's built back to be really scary.
Yeah.
So he looks like a horse.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is him. So we've got a few hints in this, but this is basically set 100 years after Eisenhorn.
Yeah.
So Haldane's now big Inquisitor in charge. He's working with Dravir and Draker Flentz, who leads the Jantine. And they're planning an evil plot to take control. And they capture Rawn, and then he's rescued, and Larkin shoots Haldane.
Yeah, Rawn goes through it a bit, doesn't
Rawn
he?
has a bit of a whole.
I have a lot to say about Rawn.
About Elim Rawn.
In Ghostmaker.
And we'll get to him when the book happens about the book Ghosts. Yeah.
But that was, for me, struggling with like the killing and the fighting. Torture is like, oh, come on, lads.
Yeah, there's a load of spooky Inquisitor torturing, Yeah. But they get Rawn back.
Yeah.
Larkin shoots her down. They arrive at their next location, Mesonoid Epsilon. Yeah, where Gaunt's so in Mesonoid Epsilon, they all get deployed. Gaunt then leads a team with his mate that locate this thing that's apparently going to change the course of the Crusade. And what it is, and this is where I'm like, is that really going to change the course of the Crusade? Whatever. Is an STC system.
Yeah, which stands for
Standard Template Construct.
So proud.
That creates Iron Men, not Tony Stark.
No,
of the other sort of Iron Men.
I loved it. They basically find a floppy disk drive with the diagnostics for Iron Men robots.
And a big thing that makes them, and churns them out.
Literally like finding a factory, they could just press a button and start having these Iron Men.
But it turns out that in a classic Dan Abnett, and then all the shit happens in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They're corrupted Iron Men, so they're going to be really chaosy when they come out.
Of course they're going to be corrupted. They've been...
Also, Gaunt's mate is actually a psychic puppet controlled by Haldane, but then gets killed, which feeds back to Haldane, who's back on Dravir's command Leviathan, which then explodes.
Yeah.
Good. And at that time they're attacked by the Jantine again, and the Ghosts and the Vitrians defeat the Jantine.
Yeah. Well, the Ghosts don't think they're going to, but the Vitrians come out to save the day.
And then they destroy the STC.
We need to emphasise the importance of the Iron Men because it's so rare for anything about back time to be like confirmed. And Dan was saying when he wrote this book, it was kind of like the Wild West. Black Library was kind of very new.
Yeah, 97, isn't it?
Yeah, so I wasn't even born then, and he was really allowed a lot of free reign. So the fact that he said he didn't think he'd be able to write anything that specific now, but the fact is this is canon now.
Yeah.
So I can imagine, and it helps me imagine before even the Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
And there are any books?
Well, no,
before
then? So this is there aren't. So that is probably one of the early. The Iron Men are like the earliest. That's probably the earliest extant thing in the universe. Like the Iron Men are from at some point between 15 and 30,000 years. Yeah. That's when the Iron Men exist, and no one knows because it's so far away in there.
Yeah.
But since well before the Horus Heresy, there has been the whole thing about don't make intelligent machines.
Yeah, and I'd love someone to write.
It's a lift from Dune. Like in the Dune universe, there is the Butlerian Jihad, which is the thinking machines attacked.
Yeah.
And so that's why in Dune everyone's like
mentats
and drug taking navigators and all this. It's one of those things 40k lifted from Dune.
Would they 40k say, we just got this from Dune, or would it be?
Yeah, they just had it from Dune.
Okay, it's not a universal consciousness where ideas prevail.
No, didn't take that bit.
But I would really love it if there was some books defining the fall of whatever came before.
Well, yeah, the thing is, it is like no one knows what that is before. So there's this idea that like at some point, humans go and they make loads over 15,000 years. There are all sorts of star empires and whatever they did. And there's occasional in some of the heresy books, you get these weird occasional references where it's like the quotes at the start are like, bad quote from Hamlet by William Shakespeare, M2. And then it'll be like other quote, and it'll be like from John Boglington, the ethnarch of Death World, M22.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's all you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. But
Maybe
anyway,
I'd write some fan fiction.
so that's the like A plot,
A plot.
and then there is a B plot.
Let's talk about the B plot.
So the B plot is, we get this in little glimpses, is Gaunt's origin story.
Yeah,
right?
and that's the very, very prologue, right?
The first one is the first one is him remembering the spooky fight on Durendera, when he was a cadet when he was a cadet commissar. He was serving under Commissar Oktar with a regiment called the Hirkans, and he meets a spooky chaos witch who gives him a spooky prophecy.
Yeah, it's like a proper little rhyme, and he never ever forgets that rhyme.
Yeah.
So then when he's in this cavern with the Iron Men, and he, it kind of comes back to him, and he's like, whoa. Yeah, and with the monolith. Yeah. He's kind of making sense of this prophecy, and he knows if he allows these Iron Men to exist, everything will be destroyed, and everything will be back in chaos. Yeah, so we sort of gradually find out that the whole of this plot is him fulfilling that prophecy from 20 years ago. And then basically we get the rest of the story and why the Jantine hate him and all this sort of stuff, which is essentially, we see him promoted to full officer by Oktar. Mm-hmm. We see him as a kid where his parents are killed, and he gets sent to the Schola Progenium, which is where orphans are sent to become imperial officers. He reads Ravana while he's there. It's the first mention of Ravana. And before the character had been invented, because the character wouldn't come to like 8 or 9 years later. But so Ravana's Spheres of Longing are a famous book in the world. He also meets Vane and Blenner, who will pop up again and again throughout the series. Okay. And then he, before that, we flash back to him when he found out his parents were dead. And it turns out the person who gave him the news is a guy called Dersius of the Jantine Patricians, who was his dad's commanding officer. So his dad was in the Jantine Patricians. Crazy. Yeah. And he considers him like an uncle, Uncle Dersius. Yeah. So Dersius gives him the news. And then then we find out that the last big one is that after he is given the prophecy by the witch, that leads him to find out that Dersius actually sort of betrayed his father and left him to die. So Gaunt, when he finds that out, is now a full commissar. I think he's quite recently a commissar. Yeah. And he has the power to then go, right, that was cowardice, I can now kill you. Yeah. And he comes back and he kills Dersius, Uncle Dersius. With a chainsaw to the chest. And he has a chainsaw wound as well. And we then find out that Flents, who runs the Patricians, is Dersius's son. So that's why all the Patricians hate Gaunt. And it's so cleverly done. So it's a bit of the Batman, orphaned and became rose up the ranks. Badass. And then I just thought it was really Hamlet-y style plot, very Shakespearean and massively tragic, and then blood against blood. And these epic kind of chainsaw to the chest. And I've got a matching scar that will remind me of this forever. Yeah. So that's the plot, basically. I know. That's First and Only. We get like an intro to them, and I wonder if when this was written, maybe there wasn't plans. Like Ghostmaker was serialized as a thing in a magazine. Yeah. Which is why it is the way it is. But whether there were ever plans at this point to make it 16 books long, I imagine not. I mean, I doubt it, because, as often happens, I feel like somebody writes something, it goes crazy popular, and then Games Workshop are like, could do another one of those. Do another 500 of those. Yeah. How many Horus Heresy now? 60? 60-something Horus Heresies, and then the Siege of Terror. Yep, they like it. So. Yeah, and people eat them up. This is really, really good. So it's like the most, probably one of the more actiony. We haven't really got to the thing I reckon. It's a bit like, it reminds me actually, a bit like Terry Pratchett. The first few books are kind of sounding out the concept of this world, right? And then you sort of get into it. Like the classic one with Pratchett is you tell everyone to start with Guards. Yes. Because that's the first book that feels like... Ankh-Morpork. Like Ankh-Morpork, like it is what it becomes. Yeah. And I think like First and Only is a bit weird because it's not quite what Gaunt's becomes yet, which is this like almost TV drama soap opera thing. I think Gaunt's Ghosts would make a much better TV show, possibly even than Eisenhorn. Starring Henry Cavill as Gaunt. Oh, it's Gaunt. You could do Henry Cavill as Gaunt. As Rawn. But no, I agree. I think this is epically. I mean, everyone in the whole world is like, it's like Sharp in Space. So it's like Sharp in Space. But I think it stops being like Sharp in Space, but there are similarities. Yeah, but I do think there's enough interest and storytelling within
Yeah.
it. There's so many lovely bits, especially if you had like a Netflix budget.
Yeah.
You could have a forest planet. You could explode it.
And it's just a load of guys running around in a forest planet, mostly.
Yeah. But,
Like,
and then, going underground,
Yeah.
exploding stuff. So,
it's just a load of guys in the dark.
but do we know what the Warhammer series that they're making
No,
is?
we don't. Because it's in development, which basically is code words for we don't know if we're funding it yet.
Yeah.
Right. So when it goes into production, basically, yeah, the way we've said this on other things, but the way film things work is that everything goes into development.
Yeah.
Most things do not make it out of development. There's a whole phrase called development hell where films are stuck in permanently.
Yeah.
And that process is a process of them going, what are we actually going to make? What would be the story? If we suggest this story, will Amazon take it? Will someone else take
Yeah.
it? What? Okay, you don't like that? Well, what if we suggest this story? And attaching people to it to try and get it through. And if it gets commissioned, then it goes into production, and that's when we care. Like, until that
Yeah.
point, nothing's happening.
I mean, I care too much.
Ha!
What is Warhammer TV?
Warhammer TV. That's different. So Games Workshop have a subscription service called Warhammer Plus.
Okay.
Right, and Warhammer Plus gives you a number of things. One of them is a vault full of old books, not novels, usually game books and White Dwarfs and things.
Codexes.
Which you can access. So all the ones that are out of print, you can just go and read all the old books. One thing is that you get sent a model a year. You get a special edition model a year, and
Very
things like
nice.
that, which is like limited edition just for Warhammer Plus people. And then the last one is that you they do a thing called Warhammer TV, which is like short form animations. So they do a mix of like basically stuff you find on YouTube. So they do very well produced battle reports, lore videos,
And it's like a
and
private
animations.
channel.
Yeah, so if you're a member, you're a subscription member.
Are you a member?
I am a member. I have
Oh.
not watched anything on it. I've like watched a couple of things when it first started, and I've basically forgotten because you can't watch it on the telly, so you have to watch it on your laptop.
What are the models like? Are they good?
Yeah, they're all very well done, and the 3D stuff's actually some of it's getting really clever in how it does. Like they've got some really interesting animation styles.
And have they ever animated like Gaunt's Ghost?
I don't think they have, but they've got Imperial Guard-y stuff, and they've got
Yeah.
Inquisitorial stuff. We should maybe watch one at some point.
Yeah, let's react.
Let's react to Warhammer Plus. They don't usually like. It's one of those things that gets flagged quite a lot.
No, I don't want to. One of the
people are like, "Oh, you've got
scariest
to choose
things
something."
in the warp is Games Workshop coming after you with like they are very hot on their rights.
So yeah. Anyway, so that's first. No, yeah. I mean, what did we learn? What did we learn about the world, Mira? We've got it's a human battlefield novel.
Yeah.
We've got this whole thing about all the different regiments. That's new. We've not seen that before. It's a similar to a lot of things. We got a bit of Terminator.
Yeah.
Bit of Sharp in Space so the reasons for Sharp in Space, right? He's hated by his men, who are a scout unit of sharpshooters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
who are all meant to be very good, and he sort of doesn't fit. He's the big thing actually, and you get it in this is that the constant class warfare.
Yeah.
Like even though he is actually quite posh.
All the baddies are posh.
All the baddies are posh,
Yeah.
and all the goodies are not posh.
Yeah.
And there's a whole thing of like, and this will continue. The Jantine positions essentially get replaced by a different regiment called the Volpone Blue Bloods really quickly, and they're exactly the same. So there's this whole like class in the army thing, which is very like Napoleonic First World War. The posh people are in command, or are these heavy infantry, rich regiments, and then below them are like people like the Ghosts, who are all from woods.
Yeah.
And are very skilled, but yeah.
There's very much that kind of feeling. If you ever go into work and there's one person at work that makes your life a misery, and you're like, oh God, Brian's in today. But you're gone and everyone in your regiment hates you.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a really interesting character because he plows on, he's loyal, he's good of heart. But definitely, that whole thing about a good officer.
Yeah.
So he's like the only one. And you see, as I went through the other books, like Necropolis, the whole shenanigans, so many people die because not only because of like corrupt officers who are ambitious, but rich people who are trying to make some money.
Rich
so
people.
I quite like that, especially in today's economic climate. And it's the sad thing about Gaunt is whatever he tries to do, however he tries to fight pure of heart for the Emperor, there's so much corruption in the Imperium. It's like, what can one regiment do? Well, quite a lot.
Turns out quite a lot, especially they keep on going on spy missions to win planets for people.
Yeah.
What did you think? What did you think of the Ghosts? What did you think of all these weird little people?
Okay,
These
honestly,
little wobbles that are the Ghosts.
reading it knowing I was going to talk to you and Dan about it, that really gave me the leg up because it was really rough. And I think I might have even messaged you at the beginning of this book, like, oh, this is really rough. But, you know, you can see glimpses of like, there's some really fun ideas. Again, you know, things like vox casting, those are words that Dan
were
made
invented
up
for this. Yeah.
So knowing I was going to get to talk to you.
Recaf.
All this stuff. I love reading pioneering, the beginning of something. And as you say, this evolves and becomes this amazing series. So I kind of hated the war bloody bits, but they were justified for the human story. So I'm not like, woohoo, you know, more Gaunt's books to go, but I'm absolutely intrigued. And so many people reacted to me kind of getting so emotional and, oh my God, you know, real feeling like, and I'm detecting way more kind of emotion around these heroes.
They are, because they become such relatable humans. Maybe not here, but in like as the books go on, like the humans are drawn out so well. I mean, you get this a lot in Necropolis as well. Like my favorite characters are like the miners who are like trapped, and you get this really human stories that are all, you know, they're very inspired by like wartime stories from the real world. This weirdly feels like, apart from a few things, it could be set now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think if you're a big Space Marine heresy, you know, magic kind of fan, like this is incredibly, it's incredible change of pace. I would recommend.
Good.
Okay, so one of my usual questions is, Ian.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Stuff.
lasguns.
Yeah.
You know, vox casters, different kinds of tanks.
Yeah.
Can you play all these things that pop up in
I
this?
think pretty much everything in First and Only you can play, including Gaunt's Ghosts. There are models for them.
I saw
Did you
that.
Google this? Yeah,
I did.
So there have actually been 2 releases of models for Gaunt's Ghosts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you can actually play, I don't know if you know, all the rules are changing right now, but in theory, you can play them, you can play Gaunt's Ghosts. I
might play Gaunt's Ghosts in the game of Frostgrave or something.
Yeah, or something like Kill Team they'd do quite well at.
Yeah.
Kill Team or something like that.
I've just learned way more about war than I ever thought I would.
Oh, yeah, well.
I now know what Marker Fire is.
Yeah, Tracer and Marker Fire,
Yeah. It's just the language in this is unbelievably warlike. So, what was that? Zoran's voice rafts over the short range intercom. That was not shellfire. Agreed, Gaunt replied. And then it goes on a little bit, and then they're like, unless driven by some necessity unknown to us, Victorian troops would not ignite explosions like that. It might as well act as marker fire for the enemy guns. They'll soon be shelling that section, knowing someone was there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, shelling is this, marker fire is that, and I know way too much about war now.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones that, like, because it's a bit more of a war novel and a bit less of an action novel. You do actually, like, it is written like it is the Second World War, right? First World War in some cases.
The other thing is the Sabbath worlds. So Dan began in this small corner of the universe.
Yeah, well, he does that with Eisenhorn as well.
Yeah. And was kind of explaining how you can't have coincidences. So the fact that Gaunt gets to have this tiny part of the whole universe, but also shows the scale of the whole crusade. Yeah. This is just going on in one tiny solar system.
The Sabbat worlds is like a sector or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a number of planets. You get the impression there is this massive war happening. But even so, that massive war is still like one of 100 things that are happening in the Imperium that year.
Which is, it's that whole thing where, you're watching a show and then they zoom out of, the characters and go into space, and it's just happening everywhere.
And there's like a weird local thing as well, like this idea that in that area of the Imperium, a crusade's been raised. And there are some regiments from far away, but mostly it consists of going to all the planets near, but in that area and going, right, you're all planets, you all need to raise a load of troops.
Yeah.
And then you're all going to be the people who fight in that area. So, like, Tanith was in the Sabbat Worlds area.
Yeah.
That's why it was attacked by Chaos, because that's the fleet that were... They're not coming from the other side of the galaxy to help. They're not drawing in all the other sides of the galaxy. You've got their own fucking problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it reminded me a little bit of Spears of the Emperor. Do you remember the Space Marines go down to the planet and none of the kids will look at the Space Marines because they don't want to be drafted to have a seed put in them and stuff. Ugh. And I know, horrible.
We have questions from the Patreon. So Cole Sarah asks, what did Mira think of the characters in First and Only? I have done this already, but are there any particularly you liked, Mira?
Yeah, I love Milo.
Oh, Milo.
Is that a surprise to anybody, with the unicorn mug? And the reason is I think Dan's really good at giving us an innocent character or a naive character to open the door in.
Yeah.
And I did think, okay, if Milo wasn't there, Gaunt would have died at least twice, I think. Just with his magic senses.
He's magic.
He's magic, Milo.
Magic.
So I really loved that aspect, and I loved, there'd be banter between the different troops, and the baddies were so bad. They were really delightful to hate.
Were you keeping because you kept a tally of who dies, right?
My friend Jim kept a tally of who dies in Ghostmaker.
Right.
And I read it out on a scrolling list to Dan. It took about a minute. So,
but I'm sure he must have had to keep a list.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people. You run out of Celtish names.
This is one of my ambitions, to get on such good terms with Dan that one day I'm allowed to look at the database. But I imagine in 97, it wouldn't have been Excel. It would have been like Lotus or something like this.
And now he can't open it anymore. That's why the books are coming so soon. You can only open it on
a, you can't, you get any new tech. Yeah. It has to be a really...
He's got it in Quark Express.
Yeah. But, I mean, and one of the things Dan said, which I thought was really funny, I wanted to tell you, he has made mistakes and killed people, and then they pop back.
Yeah, I heard this. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but, the same name, just a guy with the same name. Can't be that many names. Brilliant. Well, we have some questions from the Patreons who have some questions about this. James says, whenever I do my half-decade reread of the Gaunt book series, on how much the early Gaunt books read like classic Second World War infantry combat, especially Necropolis. How much do you think 40k has moved away from that to discover its own identity 20 years later, where it often felt like a historical war game that's been genre shifted into sci-fi, even down to the fiction?
I mean, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic observation. It's like one of those things where you're like, do you have any questions? And a bloke goes, I'd like to mention this. And it's a little bit of a lecture, but that's a really good point. Because when I read Warhammer novels, I am now coming in on layers and layers and layers of not only Warhammer lore, but in jokes.
Yeah.
And, that's so developed, and definitely this does not feel sophisticated or sci-fi. Yes, there are science fiction elements in it, but, these... just thinking about other books we've read, there are like Xenos coming in and out, and there are, different histories have been established.
I think also I'm not sure that the way around is that 40k started out being more historical and then shifted to its own thing. Like this time,
come on, you know all the time.
Well, sort of. It's because at the time this came out, Black Library novels, there would have been a lot of like bolter porn ones, like Uriel Ventress, Space Marine.
What's that called?
Novels. Bolter porn.
What's that?
That's like with Space Marine shooting people, action novel, no plot, just shooting. Then he punched him with his face, then he shot him with a bolter and he exploded. It's just that for 200 pages.
Is that a
There was
real
a lot
thing?
of that. There's a lot of that.
Have we read any of those?
No.
Okay.
So there's a lot of that. So there would have been a bit like that. There would have been like some of the Space Marine novels would have been out. The Ultramarine novel, Graham's first series, the Ultramarine Uriel Ventress novels would have been out. But where 40k started, some of the really early novels, which we maybe we'll read those one day, like the Inquisition War, are just really weird sci-fi.
Weird?
Yeah.
Oh, like kind of trippy?
Yeah.
Oh, let's
really
do that.
Weird psychedelic sci-fi. And there was this thing, and it came up when I was doing a video about the different Imperial Guard regiments, because what they did is, in the late 80s, the Imperial Guard were just this one range of models, and they looked a bit like the guys from Rogue Trooper or something like 2000 AD. And then in the 90s they redid the Imperial Guard range, and I think it was mostly the Perry twins who did it, who now have a company to do historicals. And what they did is they kind of made all these Imperial Guard regiments that all wore different uniforms and looked different throughout the early 90s, which was a new thing to the setting at the time. Which is where you get this idea that every planet has completely different soldiers. They've all got lasguns, they're all wearing vaguely the same armour, but all their specialisms and equipment are all different. And And a lot of those, because they were historical modelers, were based on real world ones. So you ended up with like the Cadians. It was more like there's a load called the Catachans or Catachans who are in vests and bandanas like they're in Vietnam. They all look like Rambo because they're from a jungle planet. And then there's some guys dressed like Soviet army from a cold planet who are dressed like the Soviet army in World War II. And then there's some guys who are from a desert planet who are dressed like Mujahideen or something like that. Yeah. And all these planets have the different things, and all of them were really historical. So there's people in pith helmets, like who are like, you know, British colonial troops, and so that was a big thing that came in the 90s. It almost became more historical. And there's a thing where I think John Blanchard said that when he started, who's used to be recently retired as the art director for Games Workshop, when there was a second wave of regiments released in the early 2000s, which were a lot weirder, like the Vostroyans, who are these like Russian but Cossack but steampunk, and he always wanted, it was a bit where like he was always regretted the 90s bit a little because he wanted it to be weirder than just 20th century Second World War armies.
I'm here for that, space. John Blanche.
And John Blanche was like, no, I want 17th century Cossacks but steampunk. Streltsy, but also Napoleonic, but also steampunk. So so there's, I think, possibly 40k went very Second World War-y in the 90s for a bit.
That's really interesting.
And also that's when it had to fill out a lot of gaps. So that's when you had the start of Forge World, the start of the Imperial Armour series, which is the first like big campaign books where they went in depth on a campaign. And those tended to be written by the people who were really into historical gaming.
Yeah.
So it's more that 40k started out as a stupid sci-fi psychedelic game. Briefly in the like late 90s, early 2000s, got really historical because all the people writing the Forge World team and the Botherless were all writing Second World War stuff, and then maybe became something else, a bit more sort of action sci-fi afterwards.
I love that you know this. I'm much more comfortable when we are more wacky sci-fi.
Yeah.
I mean, give me Eisenhorn having his own
three-legged stick aliens.
Yeah. Do you remember he decided to be really dumb and go into this massive trippy space?
Yeah.
Give me Horus in the Serpent's Temple, you know, meeting people, you know, Magnus going, don't do it, you know, very Jim Morris in the Doors movie.
Yeah.
Is much more palatable and easy to read because yes, there's violence happening, but there's stupid Necrons or so the viscerality and like actually sitting on your sofa reading about humans is a completely different. I think it's a very full body experience. There were moments in, you know, Gaunt reading where I felt really sick or repulsed.
It does its job really well. Like, and it's because everyone's human and you can put yourself in that position so much, especially given they have no choice to be there. Like you can so easily put yourself in their mind, much more easily than you can Loken.
Yeah. And just, you know, I don't know how I would cope if I had to hang out with someone who really loved historical and wanted to replay them. Because I think that's quite hard to separate from gaming to a human experience that has happened.
Yeah.
But, you know.
There was a lot of, recently there was, we went and did a video guy on, and it's something I've touched on before, is like, that weird line of historical gaming. There's a lot of war games that are set in like the Second World War, which of course means someone has to play Germany. And there is this big thing where it's like a lot of people, me included a bit, find it like I've never been into playing Second World War games because it's a bit too close. You're like, well, that's my granddad. This isn't like far enough away for me to be completely dissociated.
No.
And I wonder if one of the nice things about books like stuff like this is that it gives you that feeling for the Second World War without actually being about the Second World War.
I completely agree. And when there's like war in Europe, there's war over the world. Like it's a bit much to read a book, then put it down, and then the news is like,
so that happened. Right now, yeah. So there's a nice separation that I quite like from the Gaunt's Ghost books, and there is this sense that because of the class thing, there is this sense that it's a bit old. It's also inspired by something a bit older than the Second World War as well. Like it's inspired by this almost Napoleonic class.
It's that thing. I mean, even the bad commanders are the ones who think, "Oh, we're probably going to die, but I'll waste 50,000 men in order to move forward a meter." So
it has lots of those overtones. But yes, so there we go. That is First and Only. Our first Gaunt's Ghost book. We are going to do 2 more of these.
Woo!
But not right now. So thank you for listening, humans who are listening, and watching, humans who are watching. I keep saying this is going to be a podcast, and one day I will actually upload them all.
Yeah, it can be a podcast if you don't look at the screen while you're listening to it.
It's true.
Yeah.
But then you wouldn't see us. Well, thank you, Mira. We're going to move on. If you want to find out more about us, or if you want to submit some questions, or even vote on the next book, then there is a Patreon link in the thing below. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.